everybody, and welcome to my channel. This is Leslie, and thank you for joining me again today. Today is another episode in the Mini Kit Monday, and yes, I know it's Tuesday, but somewhere on earth it's still Monday. So I'm a bit late in getting this out, but yeah, it's okay. It's life happens. So what I decided to do is to use my mini kit that I created, and I'll put the link down below for you to see everything I've got in this kit that I created. I decided I'm going to be making a mini album with this kit. So the funny thing is I still have so much of this kit left after I've made this, but you know what? It's fine. I will do something with it. So if you are interested to know how to make this book, the basic skeleton of the book, I'll leave a link down below for that as well. The sizes may vary from the sizes I am making today or using for my book today, but the principle remains the same. So if you're interested in that, just take a look at the link down below, and you are welcome to have a look at how I made my book and how I bound the pages and all of that. So I am just going to be using this 12 by 12 sheet, and I'm cutting it down quite a lot to fit onto this first page. And you'll see there I am just drawing lines on the front page and the back page, and I measured 1 inch into the page where I am going to line up my paper that I'm using to cover my front cover. And I'm just using my bone folder to rub down onto that paper nicely so that the paper is nicely uniform and flat. The other thing is I take my inch ruler as well, and I just cut off 1 inch on the side there that you see, and I am going to be taking my bone folder and folding up the edges, and you see that I did cut off the corners a bit. Now you have to leave sort of 1 or 2 millimeters space on each corner so that it folds over nicely. Otherwise, if you cut straight against the edge, the corner, then there'll be a gap when you fold the two pieces over, the adjacent pieces over. So you have to leave about 1 or 2 millimeters, excuse me, on the bit. And you see there that is just a little teeny tiny bit that is left there over. And I'm using the clips because this is a bit on the skimpy side. The the bit that I'm folding over, it's very small, it's thin, so I didn't want the paper to peel up. And this is a quick dry adhesive that I am using. It's Aleene's quick dry tacky glue, so it dries very quickly, and it's quite a nice glue to use for something like this. Now I wanted to use that little word called the word beautiful. I wanted to use that somewhere on the cover of the book, but I end up not using it, and I'm really glad I didn't use it because I really like the way it ends up. So I'm looking for something to cover the spine of my book, and I think that black with the gold dot is going to work perfectly. And you'll see now why I measured 1 inch into the front cover, so that the cover of the spine bleeds onto or overlaps onto the back and the front cover, and that just gives a very nice effect of to your book. It just makes it look nice and fancy. It also strengthens the edges or the hinges of your book, because that's just basically paper holding the cardboard together. So it's it just strengthens the hinges. Now when you're using your bone folder, you have to reinforce the hinges quite a lot, because the paper has to mold into those hinges. And remember that paper is not static. paper moves and it molds, so it won't it will stretch into the hinges. So you just very gently and gingerly you have to reinforce those hinges so that the paper stretches and molds into the hinges. Now, I had a little bit of an issue with that side, the front cover, with the hinge popping up the whole time. But in the end, I just reinforced it with some more glue. Now, all the covers that I am placing onto my book, they're all 1 inch bigger than the book, so that they all have the same how do I say this, coverage. Like, for example, the bits I'm folding over into the inside of the book, like that bit, it's all 1 inch. And except the front cover, as I said, the bits were a little bit small, but in the end I do stick paper over that, so you don't really see what's going on behind the paper. But still, it's just nice to have a uniform look to your book. Otherwise, it's, you know, if everything's a different size and overlaps a different way and everything, that, you know, doesn't look that nice. So especially with a little book like this, you have to try and keep things as uniform as possible. And this is what I'm doing with this book. Usually with a mini book, I try to spice things up, and I use die cuts, and I use cut folders, cut files, and acetate and things like that. But this book I kept pretty simple, and it went really quickly to you know, from start to finish, and that was awesome. Usually it takes me about a week to make a book, and this only took, I think, 2 or 3 days. So that was fine. And obviously it's not 2 or 3 consecutive days. I mean, I have 4 kids, and I have a household, and I have a husband, so I've got kids to drive around. So it just took me a while, because I had to sit down and decide to make it. I think that was the big thing for me to do. I felt a bit uninspired, if I can be so bold. I felt a teeny tiny bit uninspired. This is not my favorite paper, so, you know, I think if it was a collection that I absolutely adored and loved, it would have looked a bit different. I do have a book that I made that I absolutely adore and love, which is my absolute, oh, that book is, I love that book. I'll put a link down for that below. I used the Jane Hadfield, what's that collection called? Heart of Home collection, and that just went perfectly with my photos. The color scheme was divine. So that was, you'll see the difference in the books, and I think that is very important. If you don't use papers or a collection that is inspiring you, you're going to labor through the project. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I really like the end project of this book, but it's a labor. This one was a labor of love. So yeah. So I've got the 6x6 paper pad there, and I am going to be making the pages 6x6. Now the outside size, the size of the outside pages, the covers, that is 8x8. So you'll see that there's quite a lot of room to embellish with tags and with things outside of the perimeter of the paper. So I'm going to, yeah, just use the 6x6 papers. And so at that stage I realized that the hinges were like 3 or 4 millimeters larger than 6x6. So I had to go in and just cut them down a little bit. You see there on the edges, there shouldn't be any white. And there I'm just marking with my pencil to make sure that I get enough off. And that was, you know, that was pretty fine. It is a very small adjustment I had to make, and it didn't affect the larger picture of the book in any case. You can't even see where I took the bits off. Those tiny snips I have, they are Tim Holtz snips, and they work really well. They are very, very sharp, and they work really well. So I'm just going to be using the 6x6 papers just like that to make the pages. I'm not going to be embellishing now. What I thought I would do for this week is I'll show you how I put the basic pages together, and then next week I'll start with the embellishing on how I embellished the pages. So then you could have a look at some of that. So what I do is I take two 6x6 papers and I adhere the first 6x6 paper to the one side of the hinge, and I fold the hinge over, and I do use my bone folder or my thumb, as you can see there, to reinforce the glue. And this glue just needs a bit of help. It needs to be stuck down pretty firmly, and besides, I don't want any bubbles or any creases in my paper, so that's where the bone folder really comes in handy. And then secondly, I take another piece of 6x6 paper and I just I put glue on the entire sheet, and then I just stick it on the back of the piece that I glued to the hinge, and that reinforces the hinge as well, as it is stuck to the other side of the hinge. So then I've got my first piece of paper, or my first page. And I'm going to be doing this for all of the pages. So I'm not going to make you watch how I do this for every single page. So I'm going to fast forward to where I have done all the pages already. And there you go. And you'll see me just sticking down the last backside of the page. There, just to reinforce that hinge and to stick it on the back of the front bit of the page. And I try to keep the colors of the double pages as cohesive as possible, and just so that everything matched nicely. I'm just going to do a flip through, I think, of my pages. So there's the first. See how the colors, I try to keep the color schemes of the pages nice and cohesive. So what I did next was, there's quite a big gap in the skeleton of the book, in the spine between each page. So I decided to make pocket pages, pockets, which also end up being pages. I decided to make little triangles and use them as extra pages in between my regular pages. And then I'm obviously going to be placing another paper inside the pocket, so that it becomes a sort of interactive bit to the book. So what you're seeing here is I'm just creating the fold to where the fold to where I'm going to be sticking the adding the glue to stick it onto the into the hinge. Oh man, the spine, wow, my brain is having a moment. So I'm using, for some of it I'm using the red that red line tape. It's really strong and it's awesome. But for some of it, I actually just used my wet glue. I think to stick it down onto the paper, I just used the wet glue, I think. I just had to cut it down a teeny tiny bit, 1 or 2 millimeters, so that I'm sure that it will stick to the spine. And there you see, I actually used the red line tape to stick the pocket to the spine, and voila, there I have a little pocket. And I've gone ahead and done all of them ahead of time, and you'll see I have 5 little pockets. So now I am just going to be adding the pages into the pockets, and I'm also going to be selecting the pages obviously color scheme wise, pattern wise, and I'm going to be cutting it down as well to, I think it was 5.5 or 5 3/4, so that it fits nicely into that pocket. So I'm just going to be adding those papers there. And I think the big thing is you must, when you make a book like this, keep the color scheme of each spread sort of, try to keep it cohesive. Don't go too bold with the color scheme. There's nothing wrong with bold colors, but just keep the color scheme similar, so that when you add a page into the spread, it looks like it's meant to be there. It's not too much. And keep patterns as well. Just keep take the patterns into consideration as well. If you've got a floral pattern in there already that's very bold, try to use a plain black dot or a gold dot, or something like that. So, and there you see I've put my pages in there, and I'm just going to do one little flip through again of my book, and the front, the back, and all the pages that I have just created. You'll see, I mean, it's really, once you get the hang of it, it is really easy. Thank you for joining me today. I will see you next week, Monday. Have a great week. Bye.